And we're also going to look at budgets. We may finish early, and then you, of course, are always free to contact me afterwards. If you have additional questions, or when you first get started writing your first grant and suddenly you're wondering, how do I put together a budget? Just give me a call or email me or Christina Beck, who is our Western grant writer. And if you don't have her contact information, you can just contact me and I will refer you to her. Each of you is allowed an hour and a half of our time as free consultation. That does include both any prep we have to do for our consultation and any follow-up we might need to do. So for example, if you sent me a 10-page proposal and just wanted my feedback on it, I would need some time, probably 20 minutes, half an hour, to read through it and make my comments before we spoke. So that would count toward your time. But you receive 1.5 hours of our consultation time for each year that you are a VISTA. Incentive for re-upping, right? So anyway, let us continue on. We are going to start out looking at various websites. It used to be in the old days that you'd go to the library and there would be these books that were always a couple years out of date of funders and where to find them and all that sort of thing. But today, of course, we have much better tools online. So I'm going to start out by showing you the Foundation Center database. And the Foundation Center is a national, or the national library for foundation work. And that is both private foundations, which we talked about last time, and corporate foundations and corporate giving as well. And the Foundation Center has many valuable resources. I would definitely spend some time surfing around on this website, and just to show you some good places to get started. Gain knowledge, go down here to our websites. Glass Pockets is a site that is relatively new, and it's comprised of funders who are willing to reveal, be transparent about their giving, which a lot of funders are not. GrantCraft is a site I use quite a bit. It's actually intended for funders, and it's a series of brochures and reports written to funders about issues that affect them. For example, there's an entire 30-page paper on how to say yes and no to grantees. So you GrantCraft gives you the opportunity to sort of get inside the funder's head a little bit. There also are really good reports on, for example, how to come up with outcomes for advocacy, which takes so long to reap any results. GrantSpace is another really great place for you to visit. That's where there are all sorts of free little tutorials, including one on how to read tax forms, and as well as ones you need to pay for. And then you also, here, you can sign up for newsletters, and I get a weekly e-alert on the various RFPs, or requests for proposals, that pop up. So that's valuable to surf around in there too. I'm also noticing, I'm going to be showing you the Foundation directory online, and I'm so glad I had to log into this site today, because I see that I can save 25% on my professional version of FDO, which I'm going to demo to you. FDO, or Foundation Directory Online, is probably the least expensive and most complete database that you can access to do research on private foundations and corporate giving. To subscribe to the professional level, and there are about 5 different levels, and the professional level, which is the highest, is expensive. It's probably, I think it's about $2,500 a year, and I share my subscription with 5 other users, which means that each of us are paying less than that. We're each paying about $500 for a really great database. For you, I know that many of you work for organizations that couldn't possibly afford that. there is what I call the baby database, which has the 10,000 largest foundations in America. But if you are working in a really remote area, a really rural area, that database isn't going to help you so much. You really need to be able to get access to the premium or professional version. Now you can subscribe to either of these for 1 month, and it's probably, I don't know, $100, $200 for a month, and then you could unsubscribe before renewing. So that's one way to have access. You could share a subscription with a couple other organizations. That's another way to do it. Or you can click right here on locations, and this lists the libraries, the actual real-life libraries locations in the United States. If you live or work near any of these sites, you can just go in. It's a free library. They have their database available there and banks of computers, and you can just spend a whole day there and do your research. So for example, we have a Vista up in Alaska, and she was going home to New York for the holidays, and I said to her, get into the New York Foundation directory online, and she did, and had some good results there. But what you are going to look at is, if you're not close to any of those offices, you're going to go down here to Funding Information Network, and you're going to go click on View a List of Locations and find a location near you. And these are all other sites. They tend to be libraries, community centers, universities, and there are 461 of them in the United States that subscribe to the Foundation Directory online. So let's just search around. I'll just search on my zip code because I'm in a rural place. I'm out here in the Shenandoah Valley of Shenandoah River Valley of Virginia, and I find that there is an information network. There's somebody has a subscription up in Winchester, which is only about 20 minutes north of me, the Handley Regional Library. So I could go up there 17 miles away and spend the day up there and do the research I needed to do. Now, since you can see I have several options within an hour and a half drive of my location. So what I would do before I go is I would actually call some of these and find out what level subscription they have. Because as I said, I want to access the highest level subscription, so that professional or platinum version if I can. And you'll just have to tell your supervisor that you need to spend a day or two, going through all of this information, collecting information. If they want you to write proposals and to bring in some money this way, they've got to give you the time for research. And I have to tell you that there's no easy way around this. A lot of times I get calls from Vistas asking me, so I have this watershed project and I work in Tennessee, and what are some good funders? Well, there are close to 90,000 funders in the United States, private foundations and corporations, so I don't have all of them at the tip of my tongue. I have to research just like everybody else, and research is a long and a slightly sort of tedious process, but it must be done if you want to reap the rewards. So anyway, that's the way you find these Funding Information Network locations. And now we are going to actually look at my subscription to the Foundation Directory Online, so you can see a little bit what you'd be looking at and what it can do. It's a very powerful tool, and I have just put up here, I'm going to be searching on this foundation, Norcross Wildlife, which had we had our beginning grant writing session in real life, I would have given you a sample letter of intent that a real life group had written to the Norcross Wildlife Foundation, and you would have critiqued it, and we would have looked at the final version that went out, edited. So Norcross Wildlife is a really great little foundation for grassroots groups that are dealing with environmental issues and who need stuff. And stuff is not easy to fund. And by stuff, I mean like a copy machine or laptops or a camera or a video camera or cell phones, or even a car. And Norcross usually won't fund the total of something. Its biggest grant is $10,000, and most of the grants are more like $3,000 to $5,000, so they're small. But that means a lot to a small organization, and it's a very easy application, just a two-page letter, a little budget, and off you go. And it's a great one to start with, low-hanging fruit. It's usually small grassroots environmental groups do get funded by this funder. So I'm going to eventually click on Norcross Wildlife, and we're going to look at what the record actually looks like. But if you're looking at this screen, you can see there are a lot of fields you can search on, including, you may remember from 2 weeks ago, that the closer a funder is to your area, the more likely they are to fund you. So you could search, for example, on how many grant makers are located in your county, or if you're in a metro area, how many funders are there that might fund whatever you're interested in there. Now, I don't know how many of you know much about Boolean language. You don't need to know a whole lot. The way that the computer talks is that you can also put or, I could say I'm looking in Atlanta or Chicago. So I could, I could say not, like I want to look for all the funders, but not Chicago. And also, if I wanted to find Norcross Wildlife and only Norcross Wildlife, I could put quotes around Norcross Wildlife, and then the database is only going to pull up that exact phrase, not everything that says Norcross and everything that says wildlife. They redid this, updated this database early last year, and for some strange reason now, when you search on state, you have to put quotes around the state, even if it's a single word. I don't know why that is. But anyway, if you have any question at all, you can always say view index. For example, metro area. I don't know what metro areas they include here. So I could click on this, and I can see, metro area of Anchorage, Alaska. This 92 in parentheses here means that there are 92 funders listed in the database in the Anchorage, Alaska area. Or Albuquerque, New Mexico. We may have, some of you may be interested in those funders. Now, they're not all going to be funders that fund things you need, but that gives you an idea. So let's just take a look at the Norcross Wildlife record, just so you can see what it looks like, and then we'll come back to this and talk a little bit about how to do the searches. So search. Okay, Norcross Wildlife Foundation. Now, if I had searched on just environmental funders in Atlanta, I would have a bigger list than this. But I'm going to just click on this and take a look at this view. Now, when it comes up, it will come up in standard view, which looks like this. And I immediately put it into compact view because from compact view, I can copy and paste this information into, if I'm keeping a grants tracker or records, I can just copy and paste right off this page. Now, it has a link to their website, so I could just go over to their website and take a look at what they have, and here they are, Norcross Wildlife Foundation. They've left me their tax forms here that I could look at, but I'm going to show you a different way to look at those. I look at their grant-making policy, their guidelines. There's their application line, and here's grants they've approved for other years. Really great, kind of a homemade-looking website, but there you go. So I'm going to go back to the screen and look at the kind of information I get here. I get their location and their telephone number. There usually is a contact person that I could at least start with. And then these numbers here are really important because this connects me to their Form 990-PF, which is their tax form. So I could click here and I could look at their tax form from 2013, but I'm not going to do that just yet. I have some additional contact information. This is the person that I would call if I had a question or email. Let's see, a little background about them. Their primary giving, the kinds of things they give to and don't give to. their fields of interest, and these are all things I could be searching on. They're a national funder, grants average less than 5,000. Here's how to approach them. Use their online application form, which I just clicked and found that. No deadlines, that's good to know. But I see that their board meets quarterly, so if their board met only once a year, I'd want to be sure that I didn't miss that. So even though there were no deadlines, I'd want to be sure I got my proposal in maybe 3 months in advance. Who their officers are, who their trustees are. That's very important because they're officers and directors. Because somebody in my circle might know somebody in their circle, so I usually transfer that over to the data sheets I'm keeping as well. And this is the affinity groups that they belong to. I could search on these too. If I am only interested in, remember I talked last time, I believe, about how funders move in schools like fish. They sign up for affinity groups, groups of other funders that are interested in the same things they're interested in. And Environmental Grant Makers Association is one of the biggest affinity groups. So I could search on just Environmental Grant Makers Association, and I would want to put the quotes, the Boolean quotes, around that search term so that I would only pull up in that exact phrase. And I could just find out, well, who's in that group. I'm also seeing what their assets are and that their total giving. This is important too. This is how much they gave out during the last tax year of record, which is 2013. And additional location information. Now, in searching, I can also go in here and I'm going to eventually want to look at their tax forms because that really gives me the detail that I need. And another thing I should tell you about all of this information is that the people who are inputting this data work for the Foundation Center. And they would not want to hear me say this, and so don't tell them that I said this, but they are librarians and not necessarily fundraisers. So the way that they view this information is a little different than, for example, the way I would look at it. They believe that everything they've put here is the truth and is all you need, but it's not all you need. And over the years of working with this database, and I've worked with it for probably 15 or 16 years now, I've come to know that this is just a guideline. A lot of these things need to be verified, including maybe the address. I don't pay much attention, for example, to purpose and activities because I'm going to figure that out from looking on the tax form. Same thing, if it said giving primarily in Cincinnati, I'd want to go look at their tax forms and see, do they really just give in Cincinnati, or is there space for me, maybe, and I'm in Tennessee. So I take all this with sort of a grain of salt. Now this other tab, which I have on the professional or platinum version, is I can just go look at all their grants. So again, I could just look at all their grants, or I could start looking for ones in my area. And I see I'm going to organize them by recipient name by clicking here. And these are who they give money to, and you can see these grants vary from about $1,000 up to $7,000. So that average, and this is the year they gave. I can also, let's say I saw that Surfrider Foundation, let's say they're next door to me and they have a mission similar to mine. I could click on that, and then I would just get the 3 grants that were made to Surfrider, and I could find out more about that. These map grants and chart grants only map and chart the grants that they actually have listed here in this search grants page. This is not all of their grants, which is why I don't use this. I also go look at tax forms because I want to see all their grants. So things could be skewed. Data could be skewed in the map and chart area based on these are the only grants that they've decided to record. Okay. So let's go back and look again at the search page. So I want to tell you a couple more things, tips about this. EIN would be their government identification number. You're hardly ever going to use that. I often search on fields of interest, but what I have learned over time is, and let me just show up environment just so I can show to you. I always use their search terms for this sort of thing because you're not going to be able to come up with whatever they have in mind. Okay, this is perfect. See all these things I could search on in an environment? Oh, let's say I wanted, oh yeah, I wanted environment, climate change, global warming. Wow, great. So I could just click on that, and let's say in geographic focus, again, let's just say I'm in Tennessee. And all the funders that fund climate change, global warming would come up. Well, that is not the case. That's what I was talking about earlier, and that this is not entirely accurate. So over time, I have learned I don't pay much attention to these very defined categories. I'm afraid I need to search on just plain old environment, which then picks all of this up. Because, again, this is somebody's interpretation of the funder's tax forms, and it may not be completely accurate. They may not have picked up, not all funders make very complete tax forms. So there may be other environmental funders that are just under environment, but they didn't go to the detail required in their tax forms for them to get classified here. So this always looks really juicy and seductive, but I tend not to use it. So let's just try environment and see how it came up with those Boolean quotes for some reason, even though it's just a single word. And same thing, let's go for, let's look in Texas. And it's telling me that in Texas, yeah, let's look at Texas. And I always put a minimum here in total giving because I want to make sure I'm getting funders that are the right size for my request. And so I usually, if I'm looking for grants at like the 5,000 level and above, I usually put 150,000 in here, and I almost never put a cap on top because just because you don't have to. Now look at this: exclude grant makers not accepting applications. Well, boy, when I first started out working with this database, I thought, of course, I don't want grant makers that are not accepting applications, right? I mean, I can't apply to them. But that's not exactly true, so I never check that. What that means is, or what I've come to learn that it means, is perhaps that they don't want a full proposal. Also, it would exclude maybe funders that really don't want applications, but maybe one of my contacts, maybe one of my volunteers or my board members knows somebody with that grant maker, knows a member of their staff or their board. So I never exclude that. Keyword search is where you might search on those affinity groups. And again, I could put in environmental, whatever they were, the Environmental Grant Makers Association. I could put that in there. Trustees, officers, donors, I don't use that very much unless I'm actually looking for somebody. Type of grant maker, that can be interesting too. There may be times when I don't want other public charities to show up. I'm not interested in whether they can fund me or not. So I might actually put not public charity. And so here I am. I'm looking for environmental funders who fund in Texas. And if I wanted national funders, I would have to put or national. This won't automatically pick up the national funders who fund in Texas. So let's just see what I get here. Maybe I give him a hard one. Okay, well, while that's coming up, let's take a look at another website. And this website, oops, our search is up here. Okay, so this is what I got. I got 152 results. That's very good. I would actually start searching then on the basis of that. That's a good list. It's not too big and it's not too small. So I probably did a pretty good search there. So I would start actually going through all of these records, and then I would take with me to the library or the university or whoever was hosting the database. I would take a disk or a thumb drive or whatever so that I could save either my list or full records. And I wouldn't necessarily look at the tax forms or spend a lot of time on websites while I was there on site, because my time is valuable there. I might only have a day, and I can look at that stuff in other ways when I get home, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So as I go through, I might check this guy and this guy and this guy, you know, and when I save, I would get a document with just with the full records of just the ones I had checked. Okay, and that would be my you know, my search results. Why don't I stop for a minute here, and Jamie, do I have any questions? And I'm not hearing Jamie, so I hope you all have been hearing me.
Yep, sorry, I just had to navigate.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Good.
It sounds fine.
Okay. Any questions?
Eileen at 356 asked, for clarification, which website has the larger price tag?
Which level? The professional level is the highest one. Platinum is the next one down, and then I don't remember what the smaller ones are called. But professional is the big one, and if you're in a remote area, you need to access either professional or platinum. Now, if in your area neither of those are available, hey, it still will be good to go look at even the smaller databases. You know, don't just give it up right there.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and unmute Eileen. Eileen, it looks like you're connected with a microphone on your computer.
Yes.
You can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, great.
I was just wondering, since we're on this website right here, is this the one? What price tag is this one? Is this the?
Sorry, thank you. I did not understand your question, and I'm about to have to reapply. So, and I have 6 users on mine, which you would not.
Oh.
So I'm afraid I don't know, and I can tell you from experience that finding the price. To find the price, I have to just about go in and apply for it, you know?
Okay, because I'm looking at the one, I'm looking online on my other browser, and it's $19.95 a month or $195 a year is the basic.
$195 a year sounds really low. That can't be right.
Okay, that's why I was wondering what was the. I'm already shopping over here.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So that sounds very cheap. And I don't see why it would be a $19.95 a month. No, I suppose that works out, doesn't that close? Yeah, I guess that could be. But mine has, you know, like I said, 6 users. We split it. So I don't know any longer what a single user for one of these top levels would be.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Anything else? Anything else, Jamie?
That is the only question we had listed.
Okay.
I'll just remind everybody, you can go ahead and raise your hand with the text feature here, or you can just send me a message at any time.
Okay, great. So, okay, so let's say you got your list, you downloaded all that stuff onto your thumb drive or whatever, and off you go home to, you know, wherever your Vista site is. Okay. Well, you need to look at those tax forms. And yes, now we are going to do what you've all been waiting for. We are going to actually look at tax forms. And what I have done is, this is another website, GuideStar.org. It's a free website, a free public website, and it contains tax forms for all of the nonprofits in this country. So even your own organizations are on file here. And excuse me, you may want to go look at your tax form, because donors do go in here and look at your tax materials. So you better make sure that you're being presented the way you wish to be presented. Now, it's a free login. I have already logged in just to save time. And I'm going to go to Norcross Wildlife again. And what I want to get to is the Form 990 documentation page. So see, this is what I get, and of course Norcross has a very unusual name, so they're the only ones that come up. So I'm going to click on them, and really, yeah, I could go look at all this stuff, but what I'm really interested in is this tax form. So I'm going to click here, and the latest tax form available on record is 2013. So I'm going to download that, and this is where you need a good connection because some of these can be pretty massive. 76 pages is pretty hefty. Most of the time they're not that big. Now, tax forms, believe it or not, are fascinating. They tell you a lot of really interesting information. And I'm not going to go through everything that is interesting about these, but I highly recommend that you go on the Foundation Center's database or on GuideStar's webpage. I'm sorry, on the Foundation Center or GuideStar webpage, and each of them have tutorials on how to read a 990. I highly recommend that. There's a lot of juicy stuff here, including they are supposed to list the top 5 paid jobs in the organization and how much they make. Let's see if I can find that on this one while I'm talking. And so while you're looking for a job, if you've gotten an offer or they ask you, you know, what kind of compensation do you want? Aha, here it is. This is what people are paid in this organization. So you know, you could find out kind of what their pay scale is like. So Norcross Wildlife, as you may have noticed when we visited their website, also has a sanctuary, a wildlife sanctuary. So their land manager, who's a full-timer, makes $108,000 a year, or did in 2013. And all these people who are also probably on the sanctuary side, this is what they make. So that's good, interesting information to know. Otherwise, the thing that I am interested in is, there's lots of stuff here, but what I really want to know about is something, it's an attachment, not part of the actual form, although this form also tells their phone number, their EIN, you know, their tax identification number, etc., and their address and all that sort of stuff, although keep in mind it's a couple years out of date. Okay, so I'm going to go straight to the back because the attachment I'm looking for is usually toward the back. And they all file for applications for extensions, so I don't care about that. But right away, I start hitting pay dirt here. And what I want is this. I want this list of what they funded during the year, fiscal year 2013. So see what great information I'm getting here. I know the organization that they funded. I see where it is. I see what they gave them and how much money they gave them and what they gave it for. Now, these are really exemplary tax forms. If you're a connoisseur like I am, you know, this really rocks your world. Many funders will just write the name of the organization. Most of them will write the city or the location. All of them will write the amount, but many will not do this level of detail. And as I may have mentioned last time, they might write general operating or general support on all of them, and unfortunately that's not really true. Hence, in the Foundation Directory database, those librarians saw that listed on the tax form and thought, aha, a general operating support funder, and that's what they then put in that Foundation Directory record, which is not truly accurate. So actions speak louder than words, and tax forms reveal action. And that's what I am interested in. This also, right before the, right before this list, I'm just going to try maybe page 50. Oop, we're still in the thick of it here, 45. This also may list board designated grants, or maybe, which I know Norcross has a special area for that. And it will give a list of the board members and may even tell where they live. This is all their investments, and I don't really care that much about this from my research. But I am interested if they have a list of, which I'll see if I can find it really quickly. Oh, here are their board members and their board members' discretionary funds that they were allowed to award just themselves. So usually just before all this list of all the gifts, there's a list of board members. And if the foundation is savvy, the board members' addresses will just be given as wherever the foundation is located. But if they're not savvy, it will tell actually their home addresses and where they actually live. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to go and hang out in front of their house until they come out and demand a $5,000 grant. But if you think about what I told you earlier, that the closer they are to your project or your organization, the more likely they're going to fund you, that can explain a lot. Or if you're looking at their tax forms and maybe, again, the foundation directory record said, oh, they're a national funder. But then you go on their tax forms and you see, oh, there's a cluster in Texas, and there's a cluster in Ohio, and there's a cluster in Maine, and there's a cluster in Florida, and a cluster in California. That's not really a national funder. That's a funder whose trustees live in California, Ohio, Texas, Florida, and Maine. So, so these tax forms tell you a lot of information. Now, you can also get really good information off a website. And as you saw earlier, the Norcross Wildlife is very, very transparent, and they put this information directly on their website, which is great. But if they don't, you know, this is the way to find out. And remember that you may recall from last time that corporations have two pots of money. They may have a foundation that's affiliated with them and is its own private nonprofit, and it will file a Form 990-PF, which you will be able to find, a tax form. But they also have marketing money that just comes through their operations and maybe sponsorships. That money is hard to trace, and there will be no tax form for that. So sometimes people call me later and say, you know, I can't find a tax form for whatever. And when I look, it's that they don't actually have a foundation. They just have giving. For example, Patagonia, which is a great funder, great environmental funder, grassroots funder, they don't have a foundation. So now they're very transparent, and they list on their website everybody that they funded and how much and all of that, but you won't be able to find a tax form for them. Okay, so that is GuideStar. GuideStar is really a valuable website for you, and as I said, free, and all you have to do is register, and that's the main information that you need right there. So I'm going to close out that tax form, and I'm going to go to our next website, which is grants.gov. So we're changing gears a little bit here and looking at government, and you may recall that I said that if you want to search for state funds or county funds or any other form of city government, municipalities, you'll have to go on that particular government entity's web portal and start surfing around because they're all different. But if you want to get a grant from the feds, you go in here. And here is their database. And this is also the way you often apply. You apply through grants.gov for government funding. So you see there's a lot of search terms. I can search on open grant opportunities. I can search grants or cooperative agreements. And as you may recall from last time, grants are money that the government pays for you to do your work. Cooperative agreements are like contracts with the government to help them do their work. You may be a tribal nation. You may be only interested in grants that are available or opportunities are available for tribal organizations. You can click that. You can also search by agency, which is really great. But what I do is I also have a subscription. I can go in here and I can decide, do I want to get notification of all the grants opportunities that come up, or maybe only some of them? And I tend to get notices from, which I forward on to you whenever I get a good one. I prefer them from agencies that I know my clients are interested in. So for example, if I were an environmental group in the Southern Appalachians, I might be interested in EPA, of course, and the Appalachian Regional Commission. Those would be probably my two main possible funders. All you folks with community agriculture programs, you naturally are going to want to be funded. You're naturally going to want to subscribe to USDA, and so forth. So this is, and these things come fast and furious. So don't let them pile up. So this is a very easy to use tool. Usually I find, let me just go and look at one of these, that the information I get from the first, I'm just going to take a look at I'm just going to take a look at one of these just so I can show you what it looks like. Okay, it says the opening and closing, archive date. This one's probably already allocated to someone. It's not really, you know, they've got eligible recipients must be a participating partner of the Great Basin. They probably already have somebody picked out that's going to get this one. And they're just posting it. But from this, I often can't really tell just at this level of information whether I am really eligible, in which case I would need to go to the application package or and download, you know, the actual RFP or the application package and really read through it to figure out if I'm eligible. It's just, these tend to be too vague for me to really make a decision at this level. Or I might have to go to the agency website and look through it. So that is grants.gov, and that does it for our for my presentation of the search engines that are available online. In the frequently asked questions handout that Jamie will be uploading, question number 2 gives a huge list, well, not huge, but a large list of other websites of interest to you, and I would definitely go searching, you know, take a look at some of those. Okay, so I am going to now move on to budgets, and what I've done here is this is a fictitious budget. It's for an organization called Big Old Trail, and it's for their Ridge Walker program, which is people who live on the trail over the summer and live in their tents, you know, 5 days a week or 6 days a week, and just help hikers in trouble and teach Leave No Trace and that sort of thing. So this is an actual program of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, my former client, but this is not by any means an actual budget or any of their real figures or anything like that. So first and foremost, I want you to just take a look at the way this looks. And before I do anything else, I'm going to show you the print version, because how many of you have gotten an Excel sheet, you know, as an attachment or something, and then you go to print it out and it prints all over the place and it doesn't work as a printout. So the first thing you need to do is be thinking about the recipient, as always, and be sure to put it in a form that is ready to be printed out by the recipient. So, for example, I had inserted some headers here and left in my grid so that when they're in their decision-making meeting, they can just say, well, I have a question about line number, you know, item number 14 in the cash column, blah, 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 blah. You know, so you want to make it easy for them. Don't make them frustrated when they're in a decision-making mode and have to be referring to these forms in paper. Okay, so, but other ways, other things to note about the way this looks. First and foremost, do not put pennies down. That is totally the sign of an amateur. Even the government doesn't want your pennies. They just want things rounded off to the, usually the government wants them, I think, to the nearest dollar. But if you have an especially big project like this one has a total budget of $90,000, you know, even rounding to the nearest 100 is fine. You don't have to nitpick here. And everyone understands, the recipient, the funder understands that this is your best guess. This is an educated guess. This is not science here. This is more like art. And I want to make this easy for them to read. So I've used, you know, underlining, and I've used bold type, and I've used spaces to make this easy to read down. And you may notice as well that I've made the first item here is in italics. And the reason it's in italics is that's who I'm applying to. So, and I've put here the full amount I've applied for. Now, yeah, they may not give me that. They may not give me anything. But I am going to make my budget with the assumption that they are going to pay out at the full amount. So, and that is expected in the field. Now, notice that I have different columns here. This is my cash expenses. This is my in-kind. And remember, in-kind is non-cash contributions. So that would be, for example, volunteer time, your volunteer time. That would be, let's say somebody donated, I don't know, donated printing or whatever. You know, that could be in there. They donated snacks from Whole Foods, so I could put that here. So that's what in-kind is. And then I have a column for totals. I don't mix these two because it's really apples and oranges. I mean, cash, if you had a huge in-kind, if you had a lot of volunteers, like, you know, $1 million in volunteer time, you wouldn't want to be throwing that into your cash column because it would totally just throw off the size of your project. Now, if the funder has a form that they want you to use, and they've combined the two, then yes, you have to do it that way. But otherwise, separate them out like this. Also, I typically would have another column here. In E, I would have a notes column. And I would usually put my, my budget narrative in the notes column. I've created a separate one for you just because I'm trying to make the most complicated, extensive example that I can to show you all the little details that can happen. But if you have a good notes column, you don't need a budget narrative on the side. Okay, so first of all, I have contributed income. And if you remember back to our pie chart, contributed income would be private foundations, and I'm applying to all states, so I have their $25,000 there. I name, by name, anything that is confirmed. So I've actually gotten a grant of $5,500 from the Big Hills Community Foundation. So I actually put it there and I put confirmed. These other folks, well, when I came up with my original budget, I made an educated guess that I could get about $12,000, $13,000 from other private foundations. So I put that in there. Does the funder need to know all of who those are and everything? No, they don't. That's good enough. Now, funders like to see a diversity of funding. If your project is only, you know, $10,000, you can probably ask a funder for the whole amount. But if it's a large project like this, unless I've developed a relationship with them and they've told me, yep, we want to fund that whole $90,000, hand it over, I know that I need to demonstrate credibility, that I can get money from other sources as well. So here I see that I also have a National Park Service cooperative agreement confirmed, and that's going to be $10,000. And I have some corporate contributions. LL Bean has given me $10,000, and you know, I think I'm probably going to get $7,500 from, I don't know, REI or Patagonia or somebody. Now, in kind is confirmed. And here, I'm getting in kind from a bunch of sources. I have some volunteers, I have some first aid kits that were donated, but I'm just putting the total into my income section. I'm not breaking it out here. You'll see in a minute, I'm going to break it out under expenses. Okay? Now I'm down to earned income, and you may not have any earned income for your project. I'm going to have a benefit hike, and I'm expecting I'll get $2,500 from that. And I sell Ridge Runner products, you know, like t-shirts and stuff, and I'm going to get some money from that. Okay, and I'm going to use some of my own operating funds. Normally, you wouldn't use this, and I don't recommend it, but for a large thing like this, you know, it's okay. Like I said, I just wanted to make it as complicated as possible for you, so you'd see a lot of options. Okay, and then I've got subtotals here. And I've subtotaled everything all along the way so that the funder can view it easily. So I've subtotaled here, and I've got a $90,000 or $91,000 project. Okay, now I go to expenses, and you always start with the staff, which is the largest. Now this is where you can start to get some of your salaries covered. My regional director, who makes $45,000 a year, she ballparks that this is going to be 10% of her time. Now, you don't have to sit down and, you know, figure this out hour by hour, but you probably have a pretty good gut feeling for the percentages of time you spend on things. So we're going to put 10% of her salary in here. And then the assistant regional director, we're going to put 20%. And then we can also apply for some of their health insurance, their FICA, their other employee benefits. Now, since this is a big established organization, they have employee benefits. You might be too small for that, and it's going to be very, very little, if anything. So I'm prorating their benefits at 20%. This 20% is something that I would get from the treasurer or the executive director or the finance committee or the accountant or whatever. This is not something that I am going to figure out. So don't worry, you don't have to figure that out. And all I have to do here is just add this and this together and take that 20% that I got from, from the accountant or whatever, and add that on here. Oh, and by the way, make sure that all of your cells actually calculate. Don't, get your adding machine out on the side and then just start plugging in numbers, because this will alert you when you have made a mistake, or also, you'll see when we get to the bottom, we want to have a budget that pretty much zeroes out. And since this is art rather than science, it can be telling you whether you need to have fewer expenses or more income, or which direction you need to go to zero your project. So you'll understand that better when we get to the bottom. And then I have some volunteers here. I'm going to have 3 volunteers at $15 an hour at $20 a piece, and that's going in my in-kind column. So see, I'm starting to break out that $7,000 of in-kind that was listed above in income. Now, the volunteer rate, including your own, is more like $22 an hour. And you find that figure on Independent Sector. It's in that list of websites on the Frequently Asked Questions. And they are the national organization that tracks the value of a volunteer hour every year. And you'll see they have a big chart there which also gives what the volunteer hour is worth per state. But as Avistas, you can use that national average volunteer hour. And that's significant because if your funder really wants a match and they'll accept in-kind time, you want that number to be high. So, so that's how to value your time. The other thing to do is always write in the cost, a percentage of the cost share. Because especially if your site's going to be re-upping for another Vista after you, help them pay for that by figuring out, and most of these grants will take at least 6 months to actually pan out. So, if you're going to be spending, 25% of your time on a project, put in 25% of that cost share. Help them out. That is actually an expense for your organization. So, and otherwise, that money is very hard to find. So we have contracted labor usually comes next, and that's, the Ridge Runners themselves get stipends. And notice I've indicated how I've calculated all of these things. The more of this kind of stuff that I include, the less I need to make a note about or put in my budget narrative. Okay? And again, I'm subtotaling here. Now, you may have another column in here if you have a funder like REI that wants to know exactly how their money is going to be spent. So there might be a column in there that would just show how I'm going to be spending their money. And what brought that to mind for me was nobody wants to pay for travel. You may remember what I said last time, that funders they assume that if you're going to travel, you're going to stay in the Four Seasons hotel or something. So you need to always be very careful to justify travel. Now these folks are just going to be staying, in tents, and they're going to be staying at a hostel, and this is nothing extravagant here. So even REI would probably be they'd probably feel comfortable paying for that. 49 cents. I think now the federal rate is something more like 56 cents or something. I always use you are welcome to use the federal rate. And you could even make a note on the side, used federal rate for mileage. And you can get that on the IRS website. You just Google federal mileage rate and that will come up. Program costs. This is kind of a catch-all for all the stuff I need to run my program. And see, again, I've explain why I need these things. This is going to be 500 two-color brochures, advertising, where it's going to happen, And then I also got some stuff donated here. I'm going to be paying $500 for a Ridge Runner room and board while they're out there on the trail, but I got $5,000, but I'm going to be getting $5,000 donated from somebody else, and I might write that down in the notes who donated that. Again, I got some first aid materials. Maybe I got those from LL Bean, let's say, and so I might put that out there. So that's my program subtotal. Then administrative expenses. This is art, not science. You don't have to actually go look up your phone bill and then figure out like what percentage of your phone bill you think it would be. I have never been challenged on these figures, and as long as they're reasonable, most funders, all funders so far, have been fine with this. If it's a large budget, a little miscellaneous is okay too. Nobody expects that this is going to be exact. And then you have your administrative expenses subtotal. Now, this part down here is all very important. I subtotal my direct expenses. Direct expenses, that's everything I have here except what they call overhead or indirect expenses. You notice that when you look at everything I have here in my expenses, I don't have my rent. I don't have maybe the rental of my copy machine. I don't, there's a lot of just my utilities. I don't have that kind of stuff covered. And funders are slowly turning around on this and understanding that nonprofits don't function for free without any rent or those types of expenses. Another way to cover some of your overhead is you can put, if you have a bookkeeper, you can put the bookkeeper in here, at 3% or something. You can put your office manager in here at 4% or something like that. So, all of those people do contribute to a project. Okay, so indirect expenses. This is something that, this is a big secret that I am passing on to you and something that I've only learned from years and years of experience. If a funder says no indirect or overhead expenses, you cannot do this, okay? But if they don't say anything, then I usually take a percentage of the direct expenses, usually somewhere between 10 and maybe 17%, and add it in as indirect expense. And what that is going toward my utilities, all that other stuff that I can't get covered, the housekeeping, and my office rent. I would never call it overhead. Overhead is a dirty word. Don't ever say it around a funder. But I can call it indirect expenses. And again, it would depend on the size of the funder, my relationship with the funder, the size of the project. It's kind of a figure that I just massage. It could be that my indirect expenses are actually higher than 17%, and for a large organization, they definitely will be. But I can't usually, if I put, indirect expenses at 35%, the funder would run screaming from the room and they would never look any further. So anyway, so I add that. Again, it's a figure that I calculated using the 10%, but I actually then, to make it a round number, I then typed it in. So that's my one exception to the rule of actually using calculations in your cells. Okay, and I have my total. So I have my total expenses. Now, notice this is also calculated. This is my surplus or deficit. I would like it to zero, but if it doesn't always zero, that's okay. It can be a little bit off. For a project this size, if it was off by as much, if it were off as much by $50, that would be okay. But you want a project to zero out. So let's say I made a change here. Let's say I decided this was $800. See what happens. Oops. You see, this really helps you when you are developing your budget. So as you're plugging numbers in here, up high in the income and down here in expense, you may come out with a deficit and then you'll be like, oh gosh, I've got to come up with more money somehow. Or is there some way I can cut the expenses in my project? So this is definitely soft science or art. Why don't I stop for questions here, and then we will go on to the budget narrative as well. So, questions?
At the moment, I do not see any questions, nor do I see any hands raised. So I think you're just soaking in all the information at this point.
You guys better not be sleeping. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at the budget narrative. And again, this is a typical thing that vistas call me about when they do their first proposal and they have to put together their first budget. You know, you will have this budget as a handout, so feel free to use it as a reference. But you are also welcome to call me or Christina, and we'll be happy to help you figure out how to put together your budget. You can also get general operating support if you can package your general operating as a project. That is, it's possible to get funded for general operating support that way. So if your organization, for example, has one function, let's say you're a youth corps, and you work on 5 public land projects per year, you could package that as those are 5 youth corps projects that are your project, and get all, you know, and make that cohesive with your gen op support. It is not easy to get general operating support from institutional funders. I can't repeat that enough. That's often the first reason people come to me. They come and say, we need some grants for general operating support, and I just have to tell them that is just not going to happen. You know, it can happen after you've worked with a funder for a while and they know you, and perhaps your project report can be, or your project proposal can be converted to gen op support, but it's just not, this is not a good way to get funding, reliable funding for that important expense. Okay, so let's take a look then at our budget narrative. Okay, so note that I've made it's in the exact same order as the budget. I've referred to the line items. I've put all the topics in the same order. It's got the same header. And if you were writing a budget narrative for a government agency, they want a note for every single line item. So, you know, I use pencils, you know, pencils at 10 cents or, you know, 25 cents a piece. And then you have to write in the line item, I use pencils to write with. You know, but most funders do not require a budget narrative, or just the notes that I recommend you make in the budget itself are enough. And in that case, you would have a budget that was landscape format, not, you know, not portrait, the way that I did it. Okay. So for this one, though, for Allstate, I've just decided to do, I need a note only for things that are not clear from the budget. Okay? Another thing about budgets is you need to make sure that there are no surprises in the budget. In other words, when somebody reads your proposal, and often funders will go to the budget first, so don't just think of it as, budget, I'll just do it later, I really got to write this beautiful proposal. They will look at the budget first, and then they will go to the proposal. And for a person who's used to looking at budgets, they will start noting red flags right away. So when you want to make sure that the budget and the proposal tell the same story. Don't, you know, go through your beautiful proposal and then have expenses for 2 laptops in your budget that you never mentioned in your proposal, why you need them. But this is another place where you could mention why you need those laptops. Okay, so for example, I wanted to clarify, you know, my other private foundations, and I'm going to get to this attachment and I'll show you this shortly. If I had anything in my budget that was particularly expensive or particularly cheap, I'd want to explain why. For example, I worked with a telemedicine program that was doing psychological examinations of people in rural areas. They were doing, you know, social work sort of stuff, mental health, from a distance. The areas where they were working, you know, there were no psychiatrists, no qualified psychiatrists that wanted to go there and work there full time. So they were using this televideoing, or this to do their intake interviews with the potential patients or clients. Well, unlike a broken arm or broken leg, you need to really, in doing a psychological analysis of someone, you need to be able to see all their body language, and what are their hands doing, and what's their facial expressions. So this organization needed especially sensitive video equipment to do that. And thus it was far more expensive than the typical telemedicine equipment. So we had to explain that in the budget narrative, why we needed that level, why the equipment that we were applying for was so expensive. And same thing if something's cheap. These people know what things cost, and they're going to be like, oh, they're being unrealistic. So you got to explain if something's really cheap. So I put, notes on here. The Ridge Runner product sales, for example, profits from T-shirts, mugs, and other items sold through the Big Old Trail website. Staff salaries, I explained what the volunteers do. The Ridge Runner trainers, I explained who they are and what their daily rate is. Again, travel, it's always good to explain travel. Oh, and we see where that in-kind came from. 5 local maintenance clubs trail maintenance clubs contribute room and board, so that's helpful. And how I came up with the round trip mileage, I averaged it as per federal reimbursement rates. And here, see on this in-kind that I had with those first aid kits, I got those from Wilderness First Aid. It's just clarifying things. Now this is attachment 2. This is another, many what will ask you for this. Few will ask you for a total budget narrative, but many will ask you for this. They will ask you, who else is, what other money are you getting for this project? And usually what they mean is other funders like us, so other institutional funders. They don't want to know if Jim Smith is giving you $20, Now, if Jim Smith is giving you $20,000, they might want to know that, and I would protect Jim Smith's identity and just say anonymous donor, $20,000. Or if I were going to have a big benefit that I expected to bring in $120,000, I would include that on here. But otherwise, they want to know who else like them is applying. So I list them, Allstate, $25,000 pending, it's this request. Remember, we saw Big Hills Community Foundation, this confirmed. And then I'm applying to these two. I'm applying to Deep Pockets Foundation and Teach Out America Foundation. And I'm applying for 15 and 10. These are pending. Am I actually going to get these amounts? I have no idea, and neither does Allstate. LL Bean, I got $10,000 from them. I'm also applying to REI and Target, and I've got pending. And here I've got some confirmed, and here I've got another pending. Now, where people tend to get confused is, remember on my application, on my budget, I had total foundations were going to give me $43,000, right? Okay, well, I look at this. Well, let's say I added all this up, and it was more than $43,000, or it was less. Well, that doesn't matter. It's okay, because the recipient knows I'm not going to get all of this. So this does not have to equal that. This is just, remember I talked about credibility? This is where you're showing, hey, we know what we're doing. We've got some logical, we've made some rational decisions here. We've got some likely candidates here. We're asking for the right amounts from them. And, we are trying to get money from other sources. If you're at the very beginning of your fundraising and you haven't raised anything yet, then I would just put a note up here saying we're just at the beginning of our fundraising and we expect to apply to these funders in the next 3 months. So, but this is an important attachment and one that funders often ask for. And it may just be funding confirmed and pending. So if you get asked that, usually with a full proposal, don't turn in any attachments that they don't ask for. They don't appreciate that. If you think you have something that they really need to see, like maybe a landscape restoration site that you want to show a before and after or something as an example of something you've already done, that's a great excuse to call them and ask if you can submit that. But don't deluge them with materials that they don't want. Okay. In a full proposal, when you actually get to that point, you're going to just, additional sections that you might have are going to be goals and outcomes, evaluation, how are you going to evaluate your project? And I know as Vistas you're all really good at evaluation. And you might have something about what will you do if things don't go exactly as you plan. And for those, but otherwise you can use language from your LOI and just flesh it out. And you also have in your attachments a handout that is, if you have no guidelines, it's a set of questions that if you answer all of those questions under the headings that are given, you'll have a full proposal. You'll have gotten all the information in. So that concludes my presentation for today. Again, thank you so much. And Jamie, do we have any other questions, or do we dare open up and trust that everybody is on their headsets?
Yeah, at the moment there aren't any questions. I am going to try to unmute everybody here and just see how that goes. So far, we haven't had any audio explosions.
That sounds pretty good.
That sounds like somebody's in their car. So
yeah,
keep going.
Or got feedback. So, if you wake up in the middle of the night and think of a question, just email me.
I actually, Sonia, I'm interested in what kind of relationships do funders have with each other, and how does a sheet like this last attachment factor into those relationships?
That's a very good. That's a really good question. Some of them are quite isolated. The smaller family foundations are quite isolated, but they tend to know kind of who other funders are, and they can always look them up online or on GuideStar. And then the bigger funders, or the funders that are more connected or in those affinity groups, they definitely know each other, and they'll look at this list and it will mean something to them. They also for a funder to bring other funders in for your project. So that's another reason to build relationships, and also to remember that since it's a small world and they do tend to convene and know each other, there's even an affinity group called something like small foundations, or small family foundation group, or whatever. So I have heard of, and whenever I would talk to a funder on the phone, no matter what the outcome of the conversation was, I would ask them, are there any other funders you could recommend for me? Everybody loves to give advice. And you may even ask, can I mention your name when I call them, or if I send them a proposal, and see what they say. Sometimes they're trying to be helpful, and when I actually go back and research the suggestions they give me, they don't make any sense. They don't really work. But a lot of times they do, and funders are great at bringing other funders into a project, something they're excited about. So does that answer the question?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Man, who's moving house?
Somebody's moving around. I'm not sure who, but I think that Charlotte had a question. She had raised her hand. Charlotte, you're unmuted, so if you want to just go ahead and ask now.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Sonia, we've actually communicated by email and phone. This is Charlotte at Illisavik in Alaska.
Yeah, I had you in mind there.
So you've said, sort of assume that funder knows nothing about you.
Right.
I guess the question is just how much should we assume that people know? So, in my proposal, I'm probably going to have to explain a little bit about the price level on the North Slope of Alaska and how everything here is just generally expensive.
Yes.
Yes. Levels are going to be higher, but if I'm applying to funders in Alaska, I mean, how detailed do I have to be about that, or will they sort of have an understanding for it?
Funders in Alaska will understand that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless where you are, is it even more expensive than where they are? Like if they're in Sitka or something?
If they're in Anchorage, yeah, it would be more expensive here.
So you may need to mention that, but you wouldn't need to hammer it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Good question. And definitely folks who are beyond Alaska, yeah, they won't have a clue. And remember also, in all of these things, you're simply trying to establish credibility and move on. So your credibility and your uniqueness. So you don't, you want to assume that a funder knows nothing, but you also don't want to, overdo it. You want to get your point across and then keep going. Don't get bogged down.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Everybody else is unmuted except for three people who are either having audio issues or have not entered their audio pin. So anybody else that wants to ask a question, just go ahead.
Just one second. I'm also going to, at training we will go over a sample LOI. We'll do an LOI exercise, and so you'll see a kind of average LOI and evaluate it, and then get the final product. So questions?
This is Eileen. I was just going to ask, so far in my short term, I started my Vista in November, but so far in my short term, I've had four different, well, if you include the NCCC, that's 5 different grants come past my desk.
Good.
And that's really good, yes. But what you're talking about now is kind of interesting in that you go searching to match. So again, I should probably always have my proposals ready. I should have, some kind of budget going on. I mean, instead of me just saying, okay, I need to write a proposal for this money. I mean, does that sound right? Am I thinking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And you certainly don't want to be in what they call mission creep. You certainly don't want to be chasing the money, like inventing new programs just because there's a funder, Yes. You want to be following a plan, and looking, and you got to be willing to say no if you don't, if something's not right.
And I have turned things down and have felt like, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
No, you're doing the right thing.
Right. The other thing too is not to feel like I'm rushed through to get to this end date or this target date, because there'll be some more monies coming my way.
That's right.
Even though I like to meet deadlines, I don't have to meet all those deadlines. That's what I'm thinking now.
Right. So are you saying that you've written 5 proposals so far?
No.
Oh.
No, I have not.
Uh-huh.
I was counting in my head because I was really, really bummed when I had to, between me and my supervisor, decide, no, we don't need to go for that. It's not going to work this time, and she was real helpful in explaining to me, no, we'll still do the program, we'll still do the project. We just need to hold back a little bit.
Yep.
No, I think I celebrated it when I went on a cruise.
Okay, anybody else? Or we've got side conversation going on here.
What about you? Did you
Try to isolate that. Okay, got it.
Nope, not quite.
Maybe not.
Okay. Anybody else? Hey, tell those guys to order me a pizza while they're at it.
This is always the issue with
unmuting everybody. Well, I really look forward to meeting everyone in training in person. As does Christina. So, okay. So is that it, Jamie?
Actually, Sonia, if you could just repeat that last bit, you were.
so I just said I'm really looking forward to meeting all of you in training and in-person training, and to receiving your emails and phone calls, as is Christina. She's very helpful and very experienced as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Sonia. And I do have just about everybody unmuted now again. If anybody has any questions, you can stay on the line, and Sonia and I will be on. Otherwise, that concludes it. And yeah, that pretty much prepares everybody for
raising millions of dollars.
Right.
Okay. Well, go for it. Go forth and raise the money.
Thank you, Sonia. That was very helpful.
Okay, good. You're welcome.
All right. Thanks. Sarah asked when you guys will be receiving the info. I'm gonna compile everything and hopefully get it to you tomorrow. We have the PowerPoint from last time and several handouts which Sonia has available, and also possibly videos of each of these webinars to share. So we'll see if that one works.
Well, recordings, right? Please don't tell me I was actually videotaped.
No. Just the screen sharing portion. So just whatever, the audio.
Yeah.
No webcams.
Although I am wearing my fleece, just in case.
Good.
Hi, Jamie. Hi, Sonia. Thank you guys so much for hosting this webinar for us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah,
my pleasure.
Thank you. My name is Laura, and I'm actually working for the National Park Service, the DOI VISTA partnership.
Great.
And I'm a little confused about, there's a lot of gray area about who we can get money from, who we can use that money for, and I'm wondering if you have any experience or knowledge working with that.
Yeah, do you, if you are, the park itself can only apply for agency funding, you know, so there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Do they have a friends group?
Yes.
Okay, so the friends group can apply for this other stuff. They can apply for corporate money and for foundation money. Now, the parks have very limited, I'm thinking of corporations, they have very limited ways to acknowledge and thank the funders. You know, you can't go sticking, Allstate Foundation Visitor Center all over a national parks visitor center or anything like that. So that sometimes is a bit of a hindrance. But your friends group can definitely, you can definitely apply through your friends group. Did you have a particular project or proposal or something in mind?
Sort of, yeah. I've been working on creating a new partnership with a local nonprofit that just does education programs, which is what my focus is on, doing education programs. And it was brought to my attention by my supervisor that I could apply for grant funding for this partnership. I'm not sure how that works, if I'm writing it and they're submitting it, or...
Yeah, ask your supervisor is it a she?
Yes.
If she had something in mind, because I know the Park Service itself has grants for education or environmental. The EPA also has grants, and it's I'm not sure, but perhaps the park could apply. You could apply on behalf of the park. I'm not sure. You need to check me on that.
Okay.
Otherwise, yes, the group that you're partnering with could apply, and you would help them apply for the grant, and then they would be the fiscal agent. The money would go to them. It would not go to the park. So that is a possibility. Or your friends group could apply for the grant, and then the money goes, some of it to you and some of it to the education group.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're a 501c3, the education group?
Sorry, what was that?
They're a 501c3. They're a nonprofit. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you could run that you know, several ways. But the park, yeah, but it's asking a lot for a partner like that, especially if they're small, to do that on your behalf. So yes, you would work with them, and you would probably offer to write the proposal, and then there would have to be something in it for them. You know, if they're going to actually manage the money or whatever, it's typical to give, you know, 5 or 7% to the fiscal agent, to the fiscal manager.
Got it. Kind of is that indirect cost you were talking about?
No, that can actually be included, and funders understand that. If there's a fiscal agent like that, no, that's okay. That's an okay expense.
Really?
Yeah, to put in as a program cost. Yeah, they understand that you need a fiscal agent. Yeah, but you also need to, you know, some of the things that get out of your control are, you know, you're going to have to report at some point, and your VISTA term may be over by the time that they need to report. And so you need to make sure that somebody's going to follow up and make sure that this group reports on what happened. And you have to think about also the perspective, the lens from which you're writing the proposal. So, you know, who's the I in the proposal? Is it I, the education organization? I would think it is. You know, so it's going to be that group that's going to be sending in all their information, and it's going to be written from their point of view. And the park is going to be the partner, because most private funders are not going to want to fund a national park. You know, A, they can't, and B, they feel like, hey, you're being paid for through tax funding. My money's going toward other people who need it. So, so that's tricky. You've got to be sure that all that is clear between the two of you, and ideally that there's some kind of memorandum of understanding, even if it's very simple, just a simple one-page letter, you know, that that you both sign saying, you know, we understand we are going to have to file a report, you know, we understand that we will be managing the money, and so on and so forth.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because that can be a lot of work for a little organization.
Yeah, and I mean the partnership that I'm thinking about, this organization, it's one, maybe two people, and they've been around for 8 years. And
Yep, I had a feeling. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and making and not filing a report is death. I mean, boy, you have got to make sure somebody files that report. And you know, I've worked with, for example, school systems, and I've written grants with teachers, and you know, teachers are really interested in getting the money and spending the money. But then, hey, they're on to next year and their job, and then they don't file a report, and the whole school district gets a bad rap, you know, in the foundation world. And it's very hard then for another deserving teacher to get money from whoever it is, because, you know, Joe, the science teacher, didn't file a report when he was supposed to, because he's thinking, oh, that's not my job, you know. So you've got to be sure that whoever's the next VISTA or whoever's in the park, you know, that somebody's there to write that report, or your name's going to be mud.
Yeah, I see that. I see that.
Laura, I just recently, hi, can I add what I did just recently?
Yeah.
This is Eileen again. In my host site, or my host where I am, is the Bureau of Land Management, again, another department of Interior VISTA. And what we did was we partnered with our friends, but we also partnered with another group. The money will go to the friends, but all three of us are I'm really writing the grant, but all three of us are reading it and editing it together. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's good. And how will the money be allocated?
Well, if we get the grant, it'll be allocated to the Friends group, and the Friends group has, I can't remember what you call it, a little bit of, you know, leeway with some of the money, administrative costs with that. It wasn't as complicated, and it definitely wasn't as much money as the one you just showed us.
Well, yeah.
But we, you know, every time when I worked on the document, you know, it was like every couple of days we'd all read it, supposedly, you know, and edit.
But when the money comes in, I'm assuming that some money then will go to the third group, some money may go to the BLM, right? And some will go to that other group?
Well, the money won't go to the BLM at all, but the money will go to the third group. But we just had one group doing
Apply. Yeah.
And I actually wrote it for the Friends group. So
yeah. So the Friends and that other group need to be clear on who's getting what and when. Yeah, because that's a place where breakdowns often happen.
And actually, the third group was actually a former Department of Interior Vista herself, so she was very helpful.
Good.
Yes.
That's good.
And I just fell upon that. That wasn't planned.
Yep. That's great. Yeah.
Oh, that's
so
great.
So those are cases where you may have to, call the funder and ask, like, whose board list do you want? Do you want all of our board lists or just one, or, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess again, Eileen and I started our term the same time in November, and since then I've heard and seen that my Friends group isn't the most active. And I'm not sure if it's administration issues or something's going on there, and their nonprofit status was actually in question this year too. So I'm a little leery about including them.
Yeah.
If I can just go directly to my partnership, who is a nonprofit, if that would work.
Yep, you can do that.
Okay.
Yep, you can do that, absolutely. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And, yeah, just make sure that you have a little, one-page agreement or something about, when things are going to get done and where the money's going to go.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Sonia.
Yep, you're very welcome. Anybody else?
I think that's it.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to meeting you all.
All right. Thanks, Sonia.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.